Apologies received from Councillor Morden. Welcome to Councillor Barlow, Thomas, the substitute for him, and apologies from Colin Howe. Otherwise, it's everyone. Declarations of pecuniary interest? There are none. Fine. Minutes of our previous meeting? Correct record? Good. Now, I want to change the agenda order because the item 4, the review of the customer contact contract, I think we'll probably need to go into closed session for that to discuss the exact parts of the report. So I'm going to put that at the end if everyone's content, and we will discuss as much as we can before going into closed session. We'll take that to the end. And so that Rachel doesn't have the late night any more than is necessary, I'm going to bring her update on the teacher recruitment and retention review ahead of the discussion, item 6 on the BCLG review. Good. Everyone content with that? Yeah. So we're going to start with a presentation on the general data protection regulations. This is on page 19. You've had the presentation charts. I'm going to assume that we've looked at those, and I'm going to ask Karen to provide a commentary on them rather than going through them line by line.
Okay, so good evening everybody. So page 20, the first slide. Now when I was asked to do an update on GDPR, I made sure I'm putting the microphone on now. The update is on GDPR/Data Protection Act 2018. So when GDPR and DPA 2018 came in, there was quite a lot of hype around all the changes, all the things that were going to change within for organisations, all the different things they had to do. Actually, for a public authority such as a council, we were already complying with the Data Protection Act 1998, been in position for 20 years. GDPR brought in some new requirements. They were then enacted in the Data Protection Act 2018. And a lot of it was just business as usual, just making tweaks to some of our policies and procedures. So I've given you a list of the who's who in relation to GDPR and data protection. And then I listed out the main changes.
Can I just ask?
Yes.
Caldicott Guardian.
Right. Each organisation.
What's that?
That's the person in charge or responsible for social care and health data. So Hannah Doody is the overall council's Caldicott Guardian. So is there any...
who or what was his Caldicott?
Dame Fiona Caldicott did a review of health and social care, well, it was specifically health data a number of years ago, and there was a Caldicott review with a number of recommendations, more for the health service, and then local authorities tagged on to that. And from that, every council needed a Caldicott Guardian. So I've listed out the main changes for the organisation and the things that we've done so far. I mean, does anybody want me to go through any of that in any detail? Excellent. The main things for me is the training, that we continue to do the training, roll it out, and where we have identified some issues, we're doing bespoke training. So only today I did some training for home care providers, so people that are going into our residents' home. They found that really, really helpful. It wasn't particularly in-depth about the legislation, it was more about the practicalities of dealing with these things on a day-to-day basis, about how they, protect and use personal data. And I go along to other divisional meetings, induction meetings, and evenings like this. So the training that we've got, it's always looking to improve what we're doing. And then I've put a double slide in there, but I focused a little bit about the fines because that was one of the big issues around GDPR, that the fines can go up to 40 million euros. Those fines aren't aimed at a public authority, they're aimed at people like Google, Microsoft, those huge organisations that have massive data breaches. Since the 24th of May, the fines that have gone out to public authorities haven't increased massively. They're still kind of on par with what they used to be when the limit was up to £500,000. And then I included a slide on enforcement action, which is about people who misuse personal data that they're not entitled to see or deal with it as they have. It is actually a criminal offence, so if you look on page 29 or 30, because I've doubled it up and called it fines and enforcement action, all of those people, they get fined, costs, victim surcharge and criminal record, so obviously most of them lose their jobs. So we're trying to get that across to people as well, that it isn't just about people losing information, it's about misusing information as well, and it does happen and action can be taken. And then sort of moving on to the slide that says so, all the dots. We've dealt with a lot of the requirements of GDPR and the New Data Protection Act, but there is still work in progress. We have a lot of policies and procedures, and there's a day job to do as well, so getting all of them up to date is an ongoing work in progress, as well as making sure that we do fully comply. We report to the Information Governance Board 6 weekly, that's chaired by Caroline Holland, the Senior Information Risk Owner, so there's a very good overview on what's going on and the progress. And there's an internal audit also currently going on as well to see where the council is, so it's being independently reviewed. Last slide, any questions? Whistle stop, Joel, whistle stop.
It was whistle stop, thank you for that. Can I just want to ask whether you've had occasion to bring up with officers any breaches that you've noticed since this has been?
So I think we have a very mature approach to information security breaches, from something as minor as, say, perhaps leaving some papers in a room or on a photocopier. There's no risk of harm to individuals, but people do notify me if they ever find anything like that. And what we do is we have data, we send out a staff bulletin every week, and we have a data security tip of the week, where we try and focus it down on what could happen in your daily life. You could send the email to the wrong person, it does happen, and it has happened. How you can recall it if it's internal, or what to do, who to report it to, and then we obviously risk assess them, etc. We just encourage people to report anything, because there is a statutory requirement now to report any serious breaches to Information Commissioner's Office, but that is if there is a risk of serious harm to individuals. So for instance, if I just sent an email to a colleague in another borough that just said, the council tax account of so-and-so is £58 in arrears, there's no risk of any serious harm coming to that person. We would log it because we still want to learn from it, but we wouldn't be escalating that. But we encourage people, if they do come across any breaches, to report them to me so that we can risk assess them, and if need be, report them to the Information Commissioner's Office.
What's the level of self-report?
Is that ball game going?
Well, here, I've been back in post almost a year, and I haven't reported anything because of the risk assessments have shown that they don't fall within the criteria.
I mean, internally.
Oh, internally?
Yeah.
Regular. Things from a lost. We have staff have tokens, to log on when you're. If they get lost, they get reported as well.
Regular is not very specific. What are we talking about? We're talking about 10 a week, or?
Oh, not 10 a week. No. In the last month, I would say, off the top of my head, maybe about 15 incidents, and a number of them have been to do with equipment. So the lost tokens, perhaps lost mobile phone, things like that. But I keep a spreadsheet with all the details on and what action we're taking with them. Like I say, anything serious goes through a proper risk assessment. Following the NHS Data Security and Protection Toolkit, they've actually got a risk assessment scoring matrix, and that actually flags when you need to report to the ICO as well. So.
No, interesting to interesting to. I'll try again. That a lot of the enforcement to date has been around schools. I was sort of pleased to see no counsellors yet. Notwithstanding the fact that one's done the training, and there's a lot of information. As is common with many of these sort of new bits of legislation, it doesn't really change life hugely from what it was before. But is there any specific advice you'd be giving to counsellors about perhaps where they need to be careful about how they pass data forward?
So, microphone on. Using secure email, never using your own personal email address because there's no security involved. Just being careful who you give information to. So, for instance, it must be very easy that somebody comes in and says, "Oh, hi, I'm Mrs. Smith's neighbour, I'm really worried about her. Can you tell me, has she been in touch with you?" Da, 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 da. And people think they're helping people by giving information, which I'm sure none of you would do. But, I mean, I could look at doing some top tips for you, if that would help, sort of based on the stuff that I send out to staff, because most of it is really, really basic things and about how you carry information when you take it out. So we give staff security bags with a little tag on them. They're not foolproof, but there's something that the organisation has put in place to help officers that take personal information out into the field to protect it a little bit further. So the little security tags help with that. So just things about, and how much information you take out. I sometimes see people with great big, the document wallet's absolutely full. Are they taking full case files out? When you go to see somebody, you must really only need the latest bit of information when you go out. So I can look at doing something like that for you, because it's not going to be very different to the tips that I send out for staff.
I also hesitate to impose a new task just because it seems like a good idea, but on the other hand, I think it would help to demonstrate, at least as far as Merton is concerned, that we have thought it through, and there is some specific, even if it's only half a dozen, top tips to counsellors. And it may actually, I think, be a prompt to members that, yes, there was a lot of hoo-ha when this all came in last year, but it's still very much, and therefore you tend to forget about it. And so maybe it's not a bad thing, that it would just be a bit of a hint to people that they need to be thinking about this at all times.
Okay, from my point of view, that it's not a huge amount of work because it's more or less already done, and it is about the basic stuff and getting the basics right. So I think it's a really good idea.
You talked about serious cases being reported to the Information Commissioner's Office. I'm not sure what the definition is, but have we been required to make a report to the Information Commissioner's Office?
In previous, in previous years, I have, where the information that was disclosed to the wrong person, it was of such a sensitive nature and there was risk to the people involved, we have reported it. There is a standard reporting template where you detail what the incident has been and what the council has done to mitigate against the risk, and also what your policies and procedures are, because most issues are down to human error, where somebody has just pressed the wrong thing or sent the wrong thing to the wrong person. So we've not come across anywhere they've been malicious. Like I say, since I've been back in post a year, we haven't reported, but we have been reported to the Information Commissioner's Office by somebody where they felt their information had been breached and it was serious enough to go to the ICO, but the ICO found that we did have all the correct processes in place and that there was such little risk of harm to the individual that they just gave us a few pointers that, make sure that your training is reviewed regularly and the people have done it, things like that.
And I also
wanted to ask if since this change, have we seen an increase in the number of subject access requests?
Yes.
And how much does that cost?
We have, off the top of my head, I can't tell you how many. It hasn't been a massive increase, but we have seen an increase in people requesting access to their information. How much it costs, it's hard to tell because they come into my team, they get logged by my team, and then they go off to the service areas for them to deal with the subject access request. Some of them can be dealt with quite quickly. It might just be, I want to see the case notes of X, Y and Z that happened. And some people want to see perhaps a whole social care file, which then needs a lot of officer time from people, so within Rachel and in adult social care, going through the case file to redact all third-party information, etc., so that we don't do any data breaches.
I'm sorry to pursue this, but
Have we had to purchase specialist software to do the reduction and to kind of provide the information in a format that is acceptable?
Okay, we're proper old school. Our redacting software is a black pen. I think some people do use, there's something you can use on Adobe Nitro, but we are actually going to look at a case management system that includes subject access requests at another authority, just to see if it's something that we might want to pursue here. It looks at complaints, FOIs, a number of things, so that could help manage it. But yeah, it depends on the officer's expertise in using Adobe Nitro, I think it is, or if it's just a smaller document, using a black pen to redact.
Do you want to comment?
well,
I'm staggered because I've recently dealt with one that cost the organisation an absolute fortune, took weeks of staff time, required us to take on additional staff to complete the task. We started off with the black pen and realised that if we continued with that, there was no conceivable prospect of achieving the task within the deadline set by the legislation, and it was so demanding and depressing, quite frankly, because it was somebody who was trying to cause trouble, as is often the case.
Referring to page 21, what qualifications do the people have to be appointed to the roles that they have? For example, the data protection officer, what are the specific qualifications and experience that he has to be appointed to that role?
Okay, there's no specific qualification that's needed in the legislation. It just says appropriate knowledge of the areas. So Paul Evans, as the Assistant Director of Corporate Governance, managing the lawyers that deal with a lot of our data protection issues. Sorry. Fulfills that criteria. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what all the criteria is, but it is.
I've got it in front of me.
Okay.
The data protection officer should be designated on the basis of professional qualities and in particular expert knowledge of data protection law and practices and the ability to fulfil the task referred to in Article 39. Now, with regards to that, have we looked to recruit, have we looked to train, or have we just found people within the organisation that kind of fit the bill?
Paul Evans fits the bill with his extensive knowledge of the subject matter.
Not speaking to Paul specifically, but generally, in fulfilling of these new roles within GDPR legislation, have we just looked to form it in-house, or have we actually thought, actually we need to pull someone in to do this, or actually we need to train this person up?
Most authorities that I'm aware of have used existing staff members, because most authorities would have somebody that either works at my level in charge of information governance, or at a more senior level, because the requirements aren't any more than our current jobs. I think for smaller organisations, so when I did the care home providers this afternoon, they're much smaller organisations, and the legislation enables them to perhaps buy in to a service where they use the services of a data protection officer. You know, they don't have to have one full time for like a very small organisation. So theoretically, we could share with another organisation, but
in my mind, I remember health and safety coming in over the last 20 years in these various forms, and I know that small organisations will outsource to a health and safety qualified person, and then large organisations will have their own individually trained health and safety specialists, right? And I see this as in some way parallel. I grant that there are sort of differences, and we've all worked within, I'm sure we've all worked within big organisations. We have a tendency, new legislation comes in, we'll find the right person, we'll double hat them with their existing stuff, we'll look for the best fit. And I'm wondering, do you think that best fit approach is appropriate to this, or do you think that we should be looking to recruit or train for, and I'm not talking about the wider workforce now, I'm talking about the specific who's list of key appointments?
Because we have the Data Protection Act 1998 in place, and the organisation has been sort of compliant with the relevant legislation, as far as I'm concerned, the right people sort of are in post, and to go out and recruit somebody extra, I think.
Or training, it's either or.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Helen.
Do you find training for teachers and governors?
So me and one information governance officer, so we don't have the resources. We have done in the past, but the workload has increased significantly in the last few years, not just because of GDPR and Data Protection Act 2018. It just has got more and more involved, so we don't really have the resources.
Have there been any issues with schools that you're aware of? And breaches?
Just the similar kind of things that I'm aware of a few, and not all in this borough, and they are all very, very similar to the accidental sending to the wrong person, the accidental, or perhaps records aren't kept up to date and sending something to the wrong address, somebody's previous address. But that's more general of what I've heard sort of across London, like in the information governance world, when people talk about things. But I'm not aware of anything specific, but we do have a schools data protection officer at Merton, specifically for schools.
Thank you.
Just a question from that question. If there was a breach from schools, to what extent is it the school that's responsible, or the authority that's responsible?
Completely the school's responsibility. So they're registered as data controllers in their own right for the school, and that's why they've got a dedicated data protection officer.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question about training as well as the dissemination of that information. So on page 27, you've got sort of a list of those who will have the training, but I assume that doesn't cover all the employees in the local authority. And sort of similarly, if there was sort of a change in role, or you were to recruit new people, that wouldn't cover necessarily those sort of new recruits. So I was just wondering how that training and information is sort of distilled throughout the organisation.
Okay. There is online training for all staff, and we roll that out annually. That's a mandatory requirement for all staff to undertake protecting information training every year. There's 3 levels to it. So level 1's for all staff. We have paper-based training for those staff that don't have access to a PC. So for instance, like some of our civil enforcement officers that are out on the beat, for them they don't use a computer on a daily basis, so we do have paper-based training for them. Then level 2 is for all people that are in charge of IT systems and certain managers, and then level 3 is for people like the Data Protection Officer, the Public Health Guardian, the Single Information Risk Owner. So that's the more general organisational training. And then those are just sort of illustrative things. So today I did the Being a Manager in Merton training. So that's for all new managers to the council. They get training on all the updates. Then I go to things like Rachel has departmental meetings with staff, so even myself or maybe one of my colleagues might go along to do a session on that. So we get invited to things, and then we also do bespoke training if an issue has been identified where we feel that people do need specific training. And usually it's kind of quite informal. It's more about talking to people to understand how things have gone wrong and what simple things they need to put in place to make it not happen again.
Good. I think if there are no further questions, I would like, Darren, if we could take up the idea of practical tips for
Of course.
the councillors.
Yeah, and I can maybe do something like a quarterly thing for you, because all I'll be doing is using the stuff that I use for the staff tips anyway, so...
Just perhaps make it simpler than it would be for the staff.
Oh yeah.
Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll come on to the update on the task group review of recruitment and retention of teachers. This is on page 41. Wait, do you want to say anything by way of intro for this?
Yeah, just a few words, if you'll indulge me. This is returning for an update because members of this committee weren't wholly satisfied, I don't think, last time we met, that we were taking forward the recommendations in the way that you wanted them to be addressed. We've updated the action plan with the subsequent work that's been undertaken. And what this is really linked to is the consolidation of the Attain partnership. So this is the schools-led collaborative partnership for strengthening school improvement across the borough. So schools working together, exercising leadership together to improve the Merton School offer across all domains. And within that, recruitment and retention, it's been enabled by the establishment of John Pepper as the partnership coordinator. And so we've got kind of capacity and legwork within the Attain partnership that we didn't have the last time we spoke to you. So I suppose I want to kind of draw attention to that and thank the work of the Attain partnership for taking this forward. You'll see updates to the action plan at actions 1, 2, 3, 4 and 7 and 16. And those are about celebrating our successes and developing a more proactive approach to the way that we use the eTeach arrangements. Apprenticeships, which we'd accepted in principle last time, but weren't jumping in with both feet because the apprenticeships are still very new. But you can see that we're getting ready to take that further with non-teaching staff appointed into schools being encouraged to take up teacher apprenticeships, opening up a wider range of recruitment routes, what I would call the Merton perks, what it is about working in the Borough of Merton that might be attractive to teachers. And then also professional development. And what you'll see is that there has been a degree of success around the work that's happened already and the steps that are in train with an increase in the uptake locally. So it feels like a better position than we were in last year and more of a good news story.
Yes, there are some.
I was really encouraged reading it. I felt that it was a lot more robust than previously, and I thought that all the recommendations have been addressed comprehensively, so I was happy with it. I was just not sure about recommendation 15.
That's a good question, and I didn't pay much attention to it because it wasn't one of the ones that we updated. But my guess would be that that was intended to be in there, and it was linked to the number of housing recommendations that were in the original action plan, which actually predates my time. so I'm hedging a little bit because I'm not sure, but I do know that there were a set of housing recommendations that were intended to kind of address the issue of teacher salaries not necessarily being up to funding, life and accommodation in Merton. And my guess is that this was linked to that, but that's my best guess.
Laxmi, is that one you can help us on? Has that come to sustainable communities?
I know you had housing, but I'm not quite sure whether it covered teachers in there. I'll have to check that and come back to you.
David. Yeah, looking at this my basic comment was yes, fine so far as it goes. What I was unable to do was to see where the changes were, because the copies were not marked up as to where the changes had occurred. So, sort of thank you to the director for what she's been able to say, and whereas, and I was reassured, obviously, that yourself and Helen had run through this, but just making the general point that I was not actually able to see the joint.
If it's helpful, I can say a bit more about where those additions were made. I mean, I know, I know what they are, so if that would be helpful. So in relation to recommendation 1, our last response kind of concluded with mentioning the establishment of the School Effectiveness Partnership, which is now known as ATTAIN. We've gone on to confirm the appointment of the Partnership Coordinator and say that since this appointment, so the bit that starts since this appointment in that kind of middle paragraph is the new text. It's about what we've done to launch this partnership and the success in the sense of using the eTeach site with more effectiveness, the rise of applicants to the NQT talent pool and so forth, and the coordinator bringing us the capacity that we needed to attend all of these other kind of teacher recruitment fairs and so forth. So that's one of the new bits in recommendation 1, and the other is just at the end of that section, which is we said previously that we'd give consideration to a Merton-based recruitment fair, and we're just confirming that we're going to assess the viability of this option at the end of the autumn term in 2019, once the evaluations of the previous year's activities have been completed. So in a sense, we're looking to see what difference John and his work has made before deciding that we need to operate something local. So that's recommendation 1. Recommendation 2, we had said last time that we'd already trialled offering individual interviews for candidates who signed up to eTeach, and we confirmed that we're doing so again this month and April 2019, so that's a new addition there. And then added in, so the section that begins the interview process allows for that face-to-face meeting with candidates and the matching process that follows that. So the personalised approach that's being implemented by the partnership coordinator is kind of developed the eTeacher approach here. And we also, in the section which read HR have indicated they're exploring developing a temp to perm policy, the addition there is that the draft document has been designed, but that has yet to be discussed with schools. So there's that's the progress there. Recommendation 3, the addition in there is the specific work that the ATTAIN board are doing around the apprenticeship levy, so being in discussions around appointing support staff. You may recall when I was talking about it last time, I said one of the challenges is you have to be working in some capacity in the school, where you have to become a salaried employee of the school in order to be able to get onto the apprenticeship, and it wasn't clear how that would work. Since the apprenticeship is more clearly established, we now know that we can have support staff in the school who engage on the teaching apprenticeship, and so it's that piece of work that's enabled us to take this forward. A final decision on the project will be made at the end of this spring term in discussion with HR. And I think that insertion there at recommendation 3 is repeated at recommendation 16 because it sort of draws across. Recommendation 4, we added in details about the different routes that are available, so school direct, PGCE and apprenticeships, all part of the new website, promoting these different routes. We've also added in the second paragraph there, the information that schools are notified of all these approaches regularly through the attendance of the partnership coordinator at cluster meetings, and through this direct contact with head teachers. And the paragraph that follows that about the possibility of a Merton focused recruitment fair, which I alluded to in an earlier recommendation as well. And then also the Attain Board considering retention awards. So at the end of the academic year this year, we'll be looking, the Attain Board will be looking at that, aimed at staff who've worked in the partnership schools for a set period of time. So that's a new insertion there under recommendation 4. Under recommendation 7, you've got the information about the Attain website, so that appears in the second paragraph. The first bit of that second paragraph, the information in the newsletter was there last time, but what's new is the Attain website reinforcing those messages, and also the addition of posters in school staff rooms by the end of this academic year. And then finally at 16, there's the insertion of the information about the apprenticeship, which I alluded to earlier. That's popped in here as well. But on the kind of on page 52, where there's a paragraph that starts, there was a fully developed leadership ladder in place. That was in the last document, but the additional information here is it's been integrated with all of the other partners through the Attain website, and that's promoted online through the marketing strategy. So that's that was one of the first things actually that the partnership coordinator put in place after appointment in summer 2018.
Thank you very much. Very helpful.
Yes, I think that underlines, well, there's two things really. One, it underlines that a lot of work has been done since we last saw this, and we're really critical. So, echo Helen's point, I think we're very pleased with that. The other, I wonder if, what else to do to think about is whether our recommendations are updated. We perhaps could show them in italics, or so that it's obvious changes being made.
Well, I'll confess that the reason why I know what the changes are is the first edition that I saw of this document did have all of the changes highlighted, and I hadn't realised that until I read the papers that it had come to you in unhighlighted form. So.
Good. John.
Page 48, recommendation 6. It seems to me that you're suggesting there that the teachers should have time to engage in activities, physical activities in the school during school periods. Where would they find the time to do that? Or am I not interpreting this recommendation 6 correctly? Organize activities in their school. You're saying that teachers have time to get involved in some physical activity like the treadmill or bicycling. What are they going to do? What is physical activity in their school?
There's a range of things that schools can do to enhance well-being.
So they have to have time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, so the recommendation was that school governing bodies would be encouraged to organise activities in the school that promote general health and well-being, and that the council's public health team would provide advice to governing bodies on what that was. And so that's what the original answer related to. And it hasn't, we haven't changed or updated this one. That was agreed and accepted. Every school will respond to this differently. So some of the stuff that I've seen in relation to teacher well-being is like well-being pact. It's not about teachers taking time or doing exercise. It's sometimes as simple as them, arriving first thing in the morning and finding that breakfast is there for them, because they haven't had time to snatch it on the way out of their home. There are loads of different meanings to well-being and loads of different ways that schools can tackle that. And so public health is providing advice, and school governing bodies are responding accordingly. But it's not requiring teachers to...
No physical activity. like running around the school.
It's not explicitly requiring physical activity, although of course some schools are implementing physical activity both for children, essentially for children.
Yeah.
Teachers are accompanying the children because getting out in the fresh air is good for their well-being. So the Merton Mile is an example of that. But that's not particularly been put in place for teacher well-being. That's been put in place to tackle childhood obesity. But
teachers get involved. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm probably going to sort of break over some old ground here. But when I look back on my life, one of the things that strikes me is just how extraordinary my teachers were. I'm the son of economic migrants. I was brought up on a council estate in one of the most deprived areas of London. And my teachers, and I can remember every teacher that ever taught me, saw not those labels as somebody with potential and encouraged and supported and helped me achieve extraordinary things. And so I kind of, when I look at the recommendations about housing, I'm aware that in those days teachers had a certain status that I don't think they still have. And I think they enjoyed a standard of living and an opportunity to have decent housing that I don't think young teachers today have. How do I know that? Because my daughter is a teacher, teaching in the same inner city school that I went to as a 5-year-old, by complete chance. She teaches children, many of them English is a second language. She teaches children with all sorts of difficulties and obstacles in their lives. And she's married to a man with a decent salary, and they've got no prospect of owning their own home. And he's from the northwest, and my worry is that good teachers will move out of London where housing is considerably cheaper. And when I read the kind of Cabinet's response, which to me smacks of computer says no, I find myself thinking, what impact is this going to have on our children and their life chances? And surely there are occasions where the answer shouldn't be computer says no, the rules say this, but actually there's a need for some political will to address a very serious problem, which really does make a difference. So, I mean, my question to the director is, do we have a problem losing good teachers in the way that I've described, and is that getting worse or is it stable, and what will be the impact on urban schools going forward?
So we don't currently have, we have pockets of problems sometimes recruiting permanent staff to particular schools. We don't have a generalised problem of recruiting to schools or the leadership in Merton, largely because the Merton family of schools is still, notwithstanding the difficulties that you describe, an attractive prospect. So quite a lot of teachers and head teachers have specifically said to me since I've been here that they started their teaching career in Merton, went and worked somewhere else for a while, have chosen to come back again because of the kind of support that the council offers teachers, school leaders and schools themselves here in Merton. So although I think the cost of living and housing does have a big bearing, and I would imagine that people who have family connections in other parts of the country would certainly think twice about where they chose to set up their home and kind of put down roots. On the whole, we're finding it possible to continue to recruit good quality teachers and leaders to our school generally, with some isolated exceptions. Sometimes schools do find themselves in difficulties. And I suppose that's partly why this came forward as an issue, was to try and increase the pool and every route. So I don't think we're complacent, because I think the worry is real. It's not confined to teaching staff. I think it's true of all public service staff, and in my directorate I would point to social workers as well, and our vacancy rate there is high. Although still better than many of our neighbouring boroughs, and again for similar sorts of reasons, that the environment here is a positive one for people who want to work in public service here. I think we just have to kind of keep an eye on it constantly, and I would encourage this committee to continue to do so, because we don't want to be caught asleep at the wheel, do we, if things change. I think house price increases in particular could very easily drive teachers out of London, particularly if they are in situations where they don't have a second income into their household, which makes up the difference, and sometimes exactly what you described is true, that you might have two relatively, in the grand scheme of things, teachers are well-paid roles compared with the national average. I'm not claiming that they don't deserve more, but you could find two income households that struggle to find housing of the kind of type that they would expect to be able to live in other places. So we're just going to have to keep an eye on that the whole time, I think.
Let me just add to that, really. The reason those recommendations were in there is that we spent a lot of time really looking in some depth at recruitment and particularly retention issues, and there is no doubt that for people who want to teach in Merton, living in Merton is rarely an option unless they already have family here and that is a worry. So yes, we can make Merton an attractive place in which to teach, but it, particularly as we go beyond the NQT and the point at which new teachers are prepared to house share and they want to move on to setting up with a partner and possibly having a family, then the pressures are absolutely on to look for cheaper housing out of borough. And then, of course, the worry is that the commute becomes onerous and they will consider relocating. So, yes, I understood why we got whacked back on that one, but it was still worth making the point. And if recruitment and retention becomes a problem, then absolutely we ought to be making the case for the role that housing plays in that. Sally.
Can I just add to that we are getting less young people going into teaching at the moment. Whenever employment drops, the people going into the initial teacher training also drops. When unemployment's higher, then you get more people going into it because it's a degree specifically to teach. And the universities, I think all universities are down on their numbers, and it's quite a significant drop. And I think it's something we need to consider in the future, because when Merton went through the change from 9 to 13 to 8 to 12, and then from 8 to 12 to primary secondary, there was also a difficulty of getting teachers in because they didn't know, they weren't secure about the future of Merton's education, or they didn't want to be embroiled in the difficulties of the extra work, the change involved. So I think it's something that does need thinking about, and housing is a way of helping, and that's why the shared accommodation linked in with suggestions of attracting teachers, if that could help just initially.
A couple of questions, just for more detail. The recommendation 3 mentions funding available through PFE, the deadline of June 2019. What's being done or can be done to promote that within schools in the borough? And then recommendation 14 accepts in principle the idea of rent deposit schemes and says it could be explored. Can you give me more detail on how that might get explored in the future?
To take the second first, at the moment I can't give more detail on that because I'm not close to that discussion, so I'm sorry, I would need to follow that up with a written answer and have to do that. In relation to recommendation 3, this kind of thing is supported through our school improvement team. So whenever there's any kind of grant or funding available, that's a team that explores with DFE what criteria are, how that needs to be communicated, whether it's something that we need to apply for directly, whether schools need to apply themselves, and provide the support if schools are applying. So it's done through the school improvement team.
Yes, and in
fairness, on recommendation 14, that's really one for the Director of Community and Housing rather than rate. So I think we're pleased with the response to recommendations now. It's fair to say, looking at Helen in particular, who was very diligent on this. So I don't think we will be asking you to come back on this, but obviously we're interested to see how things progress in the future, and we'll be watching it.
I'm happy to draw it back to your attention if I think we uncover an increasing severity in the problem of recruitment.
Please do. Thanks very much. Good.
Let's come on to the government's response to the DCLG Select Committee report on over in Scrutiny, page 35. I'll just say a few words by way of introduction. The report was published now back in December 2017 from the DCLG, and the initial government response appeared, I think, in March of last year. We had expected the statutory guidance to be published by now, and hasn't been. That's a disappointment, frankly, because we tabled this item expecting it to be available to us, and it isn't. I think the main recommendations are here, but quite a lot of the Select Committee's musings were on the culture of the authority, determining the response to scrutiny, and where scrutiny has failed quite exceptionally, and Rotherham child sexual exploitation, or going back further than that, mid-staffs and the failure of the hospital there. Where those failures have been examined in some depth, it is apparent that scrutiny has been quite ineffectual and supine against a very dominant executive, actually. So I don't think we've got that situation here in Merton, but that's certainly not a reason to be complacent. So we should be looking quite carefully at these recommendations and how they affect us. And at the end, you'll see there is a proposal that we could carry out a little bit of a review of the way we do scrutiny here in Merton, preferably with some external help and input. We haven't done that for 10 years, and probably for various reasons the time is right that we should be doing that.
Julie, you happy with that?
Okay, so let's look at the recommendations, shall we? Starting on page 36, and any comments people may have. Helen?
On that recommendation 1, the final bullet point is scrutiny committees should actively encourage public participation. I was trying to think how we did that, or how we would do that. What would that look like?
I think a good instance currently is we've had 750. Yeah, so the 700 restricted responses on the survey on road safety around schools. So yes, all channels you should be open for us to consider, I think, and and face-to-face meetings. So it's really more about us getting out there, isn't it? That's, David?
What about even physically getting out there? A bit of peripatetic scrutiny. It strikes me that we're a bit too Civic centre focused, and that I have no idea if it would work or you'd get more interest, but if the topic was right and we went to Vestry Hall, say, whether it would be feasible to hold one of our meetings there. And just to make the whole thing a bit more sort of user-friendly from the point of view of members of the public. It's quite intimidating for those who do come, say, to a planning meeting to talk in front of a large chamber. But if we could do something that's a bit more intimate, or even taking work task groups or a subcommittee or whatever, it might be sort of a more user-friendly kind of environment.
Yes, I would endorse that. We did, in fact, run a session just last week on the subject of road safety around schools and invited in people who expressed particular interest. We had them in little focus groups of 4 or 5 together, facilitated by one of the members of the task group. That was very informal. They certainly didn't feel, I think, intimidated by that. But you are right. We could do more. I think the advantage we've got, by the way, over planning, which is what's the phrase we always use, a quasi-judicial function. I mean, scrutiny is informal. It's not going to end with a determination of policy. So we can do things in a much more open way that we please the people from whom we want to sound opinions.
First off, I agree with that point from David. You know what I mean? Something that we could do wider as a council is probably reach out. We've got 20 wards and numerous sort of policy areas. Taking out and listening to people and engaging with them and seeing where things come from is something that we don't do. And to expect them to come to this on a sort of dreary Wednesday night or watch it as a result of our some of our sort of more active constituents televising it is just a lot. The other thing I would probably say is that if you want to catch things, it plays what you were talking about this. We do paperwork exercises here, and that's part of the nature of what we do. But there is a way to actually look at case studies as well, even if they're fictionalized case studies, even as if they're specifically what you're doing is, okay, taking it from point blank, if it's an intervention, if this type of incident happened in this location, can you demonstrate to us the process all the way through? Now, whether or not that's for the whole committee or for, as we've used previously, a rapporteur, I don't know why, I'm not quite sure why we use the French, but regardless, looking at an intervention, be it adult social care, be it safeguarding issue, whatever, I'd say, okay, these are the characteristics of this specific case study happening in this specific ward, it's been reported in this way, can we see it going through and actually take time out to go and speak to the teams who would then deal with it and see it almost every step of the way. Because until we scrutinise in a way that you understand the process from beginning to end, from front line to rear, you know what I mean? You're not going to, we could all be, sort of happily bullshitted by these reports, because unless you've got expertise in delivering in a number of these areas, it's reasonably easy to pull a veil. So especially when it's not quantitative reports, they're qualitative reports. So I'd like to see both a better stakeholder engagement methodologies, and that's not just scrutiny, that's wider, but also, there's nothing against doing deep dives into individual fictionalized cases where we are exposed to what would happen if ABC. and just tracking that through. And I understand that's not an easy thing to drum up or contrive, but in my experience of having done them in different walks of life, is that they are certainly educational. They might be slightly tedious for the desk officers having to work us through it, but it'll be educational for us, and the quality of the acuity of our observations when that same topic comes on a report will be far greater.
I couldn't help myself but to look up while Owen was speaking, and he said, why do we use the word rapporteur? George Bush said, because the French have no word for entrepreneur.
Yeah, okay.
Isn't there one of those in the White House now?
Thomas. Carrying on the spirit of agreement, agree with both the points before. As has been said, we might be expecting a bit much to think that we have a packed gallery on a Wednesday night, or assuming the whole borough isn't watching us on Twitter. Is there, obviously, the papers, as dry and detailed as they are accessible online, is there any sort of monitoring or tracking of who actually attempts to access those at any given time? Is there there must be some traffic coming through the website. It'd be interesting to see if anyone other than the people in this room ever attempt to look at those.
I can look into that. What we do have is a system of email alerts, and people sign up to get email alerts when agendas are published, so I can look at how many people have signed up to that. I was also just going to say about the point about the fictionalised case studies was that a proposal has been brought to Children and Young People panel to do not fictionalised but anonymised case studies to illustrate children moving between children's services and adult services, and this is this can be put into the topic suggestion pack for the panel to consider whether they'd like to take that forward next year.
It's probably, given the fact that this is the most generalist of the committees, it's probably totally appropriate that it sits with the specialist committees.
And again, on the other panels, when there are agenda items that are of sort of specific interest to the public, we do tweet them out, and we have quite a lot of success with sustainable communities asking the members of the panel to use their Twitter networks to publicise the specific item, and then there's been quite a high attendance at sustainable communities for that. It's not the same. It's not the same as joining in the discussion.
Even if it's not, even if it doesn't replace, there is. There is perhaps a wider cultural point as an organisation that there needs to be a greater take it to the people kind of stakeholder engagement, whether it's scrutiny or scrutiny suggests the decision's already been made, or pre-scrutiny, that kind of engagement. Now, how that happens and how we become more of a community-led council is up for debate. But I just think that whether or not as you want to lead that sort of cultural revolution as chair of the Senior Scrutiny Commission, or whether or not we wait for it to happen elsewhere is up to you.
We carried on a review of neighbourhood governance some years ago, and you probably know other authorities are rather more decentralised. I think Kingston is a case in point where they have area councils which, interestingly, take responsibility for planning decisions in your area. There are a lot of pros and cons with that, but the argument is that it draws people in very much to take an interest in what's happening on their patch. We have the community forums. They don't get certainly more than the level of attendance and interest that one would like to see. I'm sure we could do more than we do.
I'm afraid my proposal was not concrete. It was entirely reactive to what David said. So Giving it more thought, there might be a way to pilot it. I don't know.
Can I say one more thing? I totally agree about it and involving people as much as we possibly can. And I think that one of the reasons why we brought a proposal to sort of review scrutiny is because I think we can do better, and that's one of the aspects that we could do better on. And a review will give us an opportunity to sit round in probably smaller rooms, less formal, talk to a wider range of people about actually what could we do, what would that look like.
Yeah, and there's also experiential, again, I'm always weary of saying this because there are specialist committees, so getting people who experience specific services, we are not necessarily the committee to speak to those people, there are specialist ones for it, but there is something there of getting that in and speaking to those. There's something that I just feel is missing that I can't quite shake, if that makes sense. Paul.
I was only just going to say that I think we all have various views on scrutiny and how things might improve, but I think that almost is what the review, if we're going to agree on that, is going to discuss. It's great to have this discussion. It's premature, really, because if we're going to review what we're doing, that's when we want to really think about these things. But these are great ideas, and it's just engaging with people so people become part of the decision-making process and see these are difficult decisions. Too much is pointing at politicians saying, you made a bad decision. Bring people in to the process so they see that these are difficult decisions.
I agree with everything that people have said. With the CYP, we did get the Youth Parliament Parliament talk. And I was hoping to get a community centre coming in with one of those to the CYP with a group of youngsters, but it's never happened. And I do think it's very important whether we could work more with the Youth Parliament to get youngsters involved, because they're full of some great ideas, they think outside the box, and some of them are very confident to put forward their ideas. And I think as well as the general community, thinking of the youngsters in our schools, involving them. And really, I think it would be lovely if we could consider having perhaps someone from Youth Parliament sitting on these sort of panels. I don't know whether that's possible to change the makeup of them, where they could perhaps come, but it's difficult if they're sitting exams, they haven't got the time for it. But I do think we need to look at involving our youngsters.
I've just been involved in setting up something like that for the Sheffield City Region Combined Authority, and what they did was a shadow youth combined that reports on a quarterly basis, specifically to the leader and to the cabinet. There's definitely something there, that we can do those things. I think it's the only way to get people involved at the moment, and is to give them exposure early on, because people kind of will otherwise switch off. I think it's an excellent idea, and we should be able to open it up.
I'm sure you must be able to do that within the CYP.
Yes, thank you. Please push it back to me. You're quite right.
No, could do these in a school.
I have been working with the Parliament on ideas for this. I'll be bringing a report to the April meeting, and one of the issues is that they're not actually just interested in the CYP issues, but they're interested in personal safety and sports and all.
Well, they're welcome
sorts
to the Pensions Committee, I think.
That's probably the exception.
Area forums, when it's set up just to involve people more in what goes on in the council or whatever, and we find it very difficult to get people to these forums, so what else can we do?
Just my opinion, John, but
don't we have to offer them a bit more than attendance? Don't we have to allow them to feel that they are at least making some input into what we decide?
You've got to you've got to enfranchise them in the process. And also, there is something about it being routine and effective that gets people. You've got to create it as a fixture, rather than it being intermittent and ineffective or intermittent and it's got to be something like, oh, we can go there to discuss this, or this is coming around, or it's hitting this ward, it hits this ward in October, every October, that's when that happens, or whatever the case, on different policy areas. I think it's wider than scrutiny. The point is that, and indeed, it may be a topic for this committee to look at, is how we do community engagement. And I think that'd be worthwhile, and looking from it both from the business plan, where the community engagement takes place with regards to the development of the business plan and the election. You know what I mean? And are they in the right place? Where should we be having those conversations? All the way to within the term development of policies and the explanation of policies and the listening to concerns about policies. I think all of those may be perhaps a separate area for you to consider reporting.
Just a minor comment. I don't know much about it, but there's a lot of talk around sort of citizens' assemblies, and ministers announce those sorts of plans for piloting. I think there's been some sort of impasse there, but I don't know if that's something that we can think about in Merton.
I'm going to ask David, did we have a citizens panel for the
we did it. This was a very Blairite thing, wasn't it? We had I'm sure in the late 90s or early 2000s we had citizens' juries, and they sat and helped us to make decisions, develop policy on specific topics. And I can't quite bring an example to mind, but I think it was kind of development, planning. To some extent we do them.
Back from 3 to 2 tier.
Oh, well that might have been it. Yes.
Before my time, that's why I
yes. Yes, and I required advance notice of that to polish up my memory. But we did. Nothing ever new, really. Just give it a different name.
No. Get MD for renaming it.
Okay. Yeah, for our spanner in the works here, if we are going to review overview and scrutiny, it strikes me that the assumption is that we're looking at what we do and how we can do it better. And I think should be expanding our horizons and looking at alternative ways to do our business. And like David, I've experienced of the committee system working extremely well in Merton and in local government generally, and I felt at the time that we were forced to change, that was a step backwards. And I think if we're going to be conducting a review, we shouldn't limit ourselves to just say how can we do scrutiny better, but are there alternative ways of organising the way in which we make decisions and actually hold people to account.
That's not a spanner you threw, that's a grenade.
Well, it's a matter of interpretation. And of course, I'm sure there are people who would not wish to head in that direction because it would reduce the power of the executive. And I understand exactly what I'm saying.
I welcome your conversion from contributions both you and Peter Southgate made at the November Council meeting, when I was trying to encourage us to actually look at how we can become a first-in-class 21st century council. And we just do need to look at it without trying to anticipate what the outcome would be. Could even be much the same as we run it now. But I do think you're right, Peter, that we that we should look at how we operate and whether we could do that more effectively, and how we make better use of those who are non-exec councillors, for want of a better word. Because you could, under the committee system, become quite an expert if you wanted to be on education or social services or whatever. I mean, you were chair of the social services, weren't you? And you know, you get an in-depth knowledge there, and you can contribute to actually making decisions rather than being at the receiving end of them.
Yeah, I think that we certainly should take that in to this. We're doing it away from the political theatre of full council. I think could make for a more reasoned debate.
On the point of personal explanations, it is not a recent conversion. I've just been brought up to play nicely. When I'm speaking as vice chair of this committee, as opposed to expressing my own views, then there may be some subtle differences.
Like the Brexit secretary.
Well, that did come to mind. I think it's certainly gone around within the Labour group that those of you that I've held for a very long time.
Yeah. I think it was. I knew. Even I knew that.
Sorry. I mean, the irony is, of course, that there aren't that many of us that now remember the committee system. And certainly in my group, I'm the only one. Therefore it might sort of seem like a distant land. But there are different ways of doing local government. And I do think we ought to, going back to the committee system, some other local authorities have done that in London, and it's really worth applying our minds to whether it's something we should contemplate, at least.
So there's more. I mean, there's quite a bit more here, but I do feel we ought to perhaps move it along. So, proposal for Ruby Road and Scrutiny Merton of Power 220. Julia has set out here that we might call upon the Centre for Public Scrutiny for some help. Julia and I met informally with Ed Hammond, who's the director of CFPS, and found out in the course of that there is some LGA funding to support local authorities in reviewing their scrutiny operations, and I think if we can get our hands, if we can avail ourselves of that, we should perhaps do so if we're in agreement. And I said already, it's 10 years since we looked at this with the Leach review. Timing is probably good because we will have this statutory guidance published one day. So we really will need to think how we want to. Well, it's statutory. It's not a question of an option as to whether we implement it or not. But I suspect there will be quite a lot of discretion at the local level as to how we do things. We've also got a corporate peer review coming up, so it would be good to have this as part of that. So if you're in agreement, you're happy that we go forward and explore the idea of involving the CFPS, if we can.
So long as it doesn't just focus on scrutiny, but actually considers other ways that we can achieve
The funding from the LGA is specifically for improving overview and scrutiny. So we could use them for that. If we wanted to look at alternative structures, we'd have to do that ourselves. We wouldn't be eligible for funding to do that bit of it. You know, we can still do both, but they will have to be resourced in a different way. we might not get AGA funding anyway. I mean, it's by no means certain. We're hoping that we will, but we haven't heard back yet.
Okay.
And the other point I'll make here is that the annual survey of members of the views on scrutiny will in fact probably be quite a key input to this review. So as a number of people who responded that today, it is fewer than the number of people in this room, can I ask you to make sure you're not amongst the 50 or so who haven't responded today, but also we're clearly going to need to work through group offices to encourage people to respond. And it will be important this year because whoever does look at that will take that as... and it is also your chance to put your views as to how scrutiny might improve too.
We often put it round in the council chamber for...
We do indeed, yes.
The next meeting, don't
yes,
we?
the April meetings.
I know that we'll be doing that again. If I can find something to speak on, I will work into. Good. So carrying straight on.
6 and 8, the financial auditing task group. Any comments on those who are present? Very happy with that. Okay. Item 9, discussion of questions for the Borough Commander. We've already had some. Julia, you have a deadline of 27th of March for this, which is the week today. Yes.
No, I've got 3 from our group. If you just want us to pass them forward, we can. Obviously, there could be some overlap with what another member may have put forward. So
We haven't had others yet, have we?
No, I've had about 4 from your group. If you can show what you've got, that would be great.
Yes, I could give this to you and it can be sent to you electronically as well. So there's one on vehicle theft and organised begging. There's one about impounding lorries without road tax, MOT and insurance, especially if they're used for fly tipping, and sort of general issues of non-enforcement. And then one from Haley Ormrod, as I think we know, is very concerned about knife crime and educating young people.
And I've subsequently had one asking what the Borough Commander is doing to press the Deputy Mayor for Policing to finalise the issue of whether Wimbledon Police Station will be closed or not.
I think we should use the opportunity to actually maybe discuss together before the meeting how we build our questions for the Borough Commander. I think they've been too diffuse. Because I think we do need to press her on plans. I'm very concerned. There's a complete silence at the moment. Wimbledon Police Station, there's nothing about it. We tried a legal letter, nothing happened. Or we just got we got the back at us. I'm worried now that Lavender Hill has been saved, that we might be this is speculation on my part, but I do worry that there's both police stations in Merton, because of course Lavender Hill is part of our new large BCU. So I think we've got to press her and see, and we've got to push on the answers that weren't very good last time. Stuff about the car park at Mitcham Police Station, which is clearly not adequate to house the number of police cars in the borough. So, and response times have gone down very badly since the merger. Again, she gave us an answer. They'd learned the lessons, and response times wouldn't go down badly. And they did. They've gone down atrociously. So I suggest we have a pre-meeting to discuss how we're going to approach it.
I totally agree, because what I took away from the last one was the fact that we lily-padded over a number of issues enabled our client. So when I was asking about how people are meant to the local police officers meant to implement the antisocial behaviour strategy when that was dependent on flexibility of the police officers, yet we only had one community support officer plus one police officer because we had a long-term parental leave, and what she wasn't doing was backfilling from a low TNO area to a high TNO area. There were no answers for any of those things, all right? And there was also a question, if I'm honest, that was raised last time, that she wasn't in a position to answer a number of things, because even though it's always nice to get the most senior person, right? But if what you're talking about is operational flex, why aren't you backfilling from low crime areas to high crime areas to fill long-term sick or long-term parental leave or whatever the case? She just couldn't answer, right? And then similar to that, there was just a kind of feeling that all we did was skirt over. We never, when we asked about I asked about the travelling community strategy for the legal settlement, and she just referred, said, "Oh, we have a strategy in place." I don't think I believe it essential that we forewarn people of where we're going to go, because I don't watch Question Time. Surprise questions and answers aren't very revealing. But when we have forewarned them, we just go into that area and we really dig into that area. And if she wants to bring someone with her, the operations officer or the whoever else, great, wonderful. Yeah. But we go into that, and only 1, 2, 3 areas. Clearly, Paul will want to talk about the police station. Clearly, from Rebecca and I's wards, we would probably want to talk about the travellers community. The issue of CPO backfill and antisocial behaviour is probably a wider issue. Whatever they are, I think it'd be good that we agreed them, forewarned, and asked them to bring the right people.
That's happened in the past, hasn't it, really? Yeah.
So the opportunity now is to identify those areas so she can then work out who's the right person to bring.
Well, those are the only two from my perspective. Okay. I'd love it if the police station moves to my ward, so I'm not going to keep it going. But the two from my perspective are the strategy for dealing with travellers over the summer months, the travelling community over the summer months, and a continuing question about the backfilling of community police officers, community police support officers, to compensate for long-term absences, especially in areas which have a higher TNO rate. So how that flex is done, what is considered. They're the things I cared about last time, the things I care about this time.
Yes, but if we have the written questions by the 27th, then with a pre-meet we could, in fact, plan for the use of supplementaries to follow up on those. So it would be much more focused and effective than we've achieved in the past, I think. So if there is interest in a pre-meet, let's...
Do you want questions, or do we want areas? Because because the entire thing of the police station, you don't have to frame it as a question, really. That he's going to go on about the police station. Okay. For the flex for dealing with community police officing with long-term absences and how it impacts on antisocial behaviour within specific wards, that's an area, and that people can dig into that. Similarly, how we do. I don't think it would take forever to discuss how they intend to deal with the travelling community and any infringements that occur when they arrive, if there are any infringements. But just one, 2 or 3 areas along that would probably make more sense.
Judy, you can help us with a reason?
Yes. So do you want to still put forward the questions that you've already identified and any others that you send? And then when I write to the Borough Commander, I'll give her the questions, but also notification that these are areas, these 3 areas I got, in that you want to dig down into.
That's me. If other people want to talk on knife crime or whatever, I'm just saying what I...
Yeah. And also, just to note that we've got a report on the Travellers Unauthorised Encounter protocol on the agenda, so we'll have someone from the council as well there who will be able to assist with answering questions on that.
That lends itself to a quite good,
Yeah.
if short session.
Just checking, because I want to drill down into the sort of BCU and how to use its resource within Merton. So that involves the Wimbledon Police Station. It also involves Mitcham Police Station. And it's to see how much of the resource that Merton used to have it still has after this merger. My fear is we are losing police resource across the borough.
In fairness, Julia, I think my question is probably a subset of that wider question. So if it's about how the BCU has impacted upon resources within this borough, within the two halves of this borough, and within the wards within this borough, I think that probably covers both the police station being flexed elsewhere and community policing. So, you know what I mean, there's a subset there of how resourcing is flexed. Because the feeling I got from the last time was, oh, this is what we give, and you know what I mean, then there's no sort of dynamic management, it's just they're in that place and nothing can be done. And I'm sure that's unfair, but that's the impression you got from the questioning and the answers.
Okay, a bit more time on that than I anticipated, but so, let's put on the microphone. Thanks.
Let me come on to the work programme very briefly, but to say that at our next meeting, I think we'll start to think about our programme for next year. So bear that in mind. But just otherwise, the one meeting on the 24th of April. Yeah. No particular comments on that? No. Good. Let us come on then to the discussion of the customer contact contract, and bring Sophie in here. And we'll take this as far as we can, Sophie, in open session before we have to exclude the public. So we're back on page 9. You just want to give us a short update, Sophie, and then we'll get into, obviously bearing in mind what remarks you want to hold over for a closed session, which we can come to later.
Okay. So as set out in the report, we have now concluded the contract with our provider on the customer contact programme, and that was in December 2018. At the end of the contract, we have achieved approximately 50% of the 156 outcomes that we set out in our specification of requirements. And around 62% of the transactions that we looked to be automated have been delivered as part of that contract. And in the report I set out some of the broad areas where we've seen those delivered. We have new hosting and support arrangements in place. And we've also included in the report a sense of what uptake we've seen in these automated transactions. We've never promoted the online automation because we were waiting for some of the other elements that we anticipated being delivered arriving before we did that, so we kind of haven't pushed those forward. So I think we are reasonably pleased to see that we see more contact in those areas online than we do by phone, but clearly there's some room for improvement. And we are now looking at how we work with our new hosting arrangements to see some continued improvement on the website. And I've included an appendix of broadly what areas we're looking for. We need to be quite flexible about how we do that because the arrangements, the hosting arrangements are temporary and we're going to see another change in a few months. So we just want to get some work done before then because that will mean that we need to pause development while that change is embedded. I suppose that probably gives you enough to direct any questions you may have that I can answer.
Can I just ask you first, the graph on page 11, oh, okay, perhaps I have the answer here. I was going to ask you which is the big spike, is that the web or the phone, but it's the web, yeah. Okay.
So we saw a massive increase in telephone contact around the period of the changes to our waste service. And our analysis of that indicated that what that was is people looking for information or sometimes where they wanted to report something and weren't completely confident it had been taken forward, and so we got follow-up contact from them to kind of chase up on that. So that was what our analysis suggested in that.
Sorry, what is that? Is that web or is that phone? The big spark is the web. So that's people follow up.
No, so we saw a spike. You'll notice we also saw a spike in telephone contact at the same time.
Oh,
so we did see some spike, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But what's interesting is that what we found was there was a longer waiting time for calls, and what happened then is people automatically fell over to the website. So we saw an increase in online contact by virtue of it being the most quickest, the quickest way for people to get to log their inquiry.
I mean, there were particular failings there, I think, not on your part, but more with Veolia, where people were requesting missing wheelie bins or requesting additional food caddies or the boxes, and nothing arrived, so they then request again and again. And with the web approach, because they don't get an acknowledgement that it's being dealt with, they then switch between channels, don't they? So we probably generated an awful lot of duplicate traffic at that point.
Did you want me to respond to that?
Do you want to say
The point to make is it's not a success of the website, it's the fact that it was the failure of Veolia that caused that spike. Yeah. That's the reality, isn't it?
Do you want to comment?
Well, I'm responsible for the contact centre, so I was doing daily analysis of the contact both on the web and the telephone. I think we saw a mix of people not seeing a quick enough response to their requests for caddies, or there was also people just looking for reassurance about the process, the new process. So we did see quite a lot of contact asking for information when we analysed it, and it may be that those people either didn't trust the information that was on the website or didn't go to the website as their first point of contact. But we did do some analysis, and there was some repeated contact where they wanted a new receptacle when it wasn't available to them.
Sophie, thank you for this. 2 points. One is that I assume you'll always keep the telephone contact because there is a significant minority of people in Merton, certainly in my ward, who don't use IT, and they do everything through the phone, and I get just the occasional complaint that they don't find the telephone access quick enough and they don't have access to IT. So I assume that will never go, that you'll always keep the telephone facilities.
Yes, that's...
Oh, sorry, yeah.
I don't even know if you need this really, but our strategy is absolutely not to withdraw telephone contact. We will retain contact. That is a clear decision that's been made in our strategy. And unlike some authorities and organisations, neither do we intend to reduce or withdraw the volume or the capacity for telephone contact in order that people are forced over to the website as a kind of strategy. So neither of those strategies do we intend to adopt at all.
Thank you. And because after the initial problems with Veolia, it was easier to get through on the phone. When you'd be 14 or 15 in the queue, you'd just be second. But I recorded flighted me online and I noted my number. But it is a little bit of a task because you've got to just put your house number and not the whole address, and it comes up automatically and you have to delete. So once you get your head around that, And 5 days later, it hadn't been cleared. So I was grateful yet to be able to ring up and say it hasn't gone. And they looked it up and said, no, it's been recorded as cleared. Well, it was 5 rather large beer kegs, silver beer kegs, so it was very obvious. I wouldn't have got it muddled up. And so it had been logged by the owner that they cleared it when they hadn't. So I was glad to be able to follow up with a phone call, and then it did get removed, and I also reported it as a complaint for the logging of work that they hadn't done as having done. So while I'm happy to do it online, still I'm pleased to hear you will keep that telephone link, because when I was frustrated, I was very grateful for it.
Thanks,
Yeah. When you report anything, you don't get an acknowledgement. How are you rectifying that? Are you going to insert an email address so you automatically get an acknowledgement with the reference number?
So when we designed the solution, the intention was that it would include an account, so that you would have an area where you put in a username and password, and then the progress on your inquiries would be available to you. And therefore part of the design process was that we wouldn't need to send everybody an email because they'd have a password area. Unfortunately, that was one of the areas that was delayed in the programme and that ultimately hasn't been delivered. We can introduce that as an interim measure, but we also are looking at how we very quickly get to a place where we can have an account, because that's what people expect, we know. So that's one of the things we want to rectify as quickly as possible. Yeah.
David. Well, Sophie, you're an officer, but I'm going to just say that Councillor Alan Brittis, in his letter to residents with their council tax, went on and on about, as he does, about what a business-like council we are. And here we are. Cabinet, I'm just looking at the report here. Cabinet made their original decision on budget in July 2012. The contract started in March 2015, and from the green paper, but not giving away anything that is commercially confidential, it was supposed to have concluded on the 23rd of April last year. It got extended a bit, but we find ourselves now in April 2019, and only 62% or 38% of some of what we were expecting to be delivered has been delivered, and yet we've paid a great deal of money for that, much more it would seem proportionately than we were expecting to pay. So can you give us an idea of what 7 years on from the original decision that is represented by the 38% of things that haven't happened that should have happened, and when are they now going to happen, and how are they going to happen?
Yes, so the 38% of transactions, some of those are things like, so one of the examples from the top of my mind is for people to be able to make a complaint online. We did have that developed. We weren't content with the quality of it, and we didn't want to launch it because we felt that it wasn't of the quality that our residents would be able to use or would be acceptable. So that's one example of where we need to revisit. Another example is the account, as I've mentioned, the ability to have an account. So there are a number of areas that we need to look at. There are some pieces of work that we can do quite quickly that we're looking at now, and there are some pieces of work that where we may need to look at another provider and see what the market has to offer. So we'll start that process. I think what the report mentions is that we will be moving over to a new platform, Microsoft Office 365. So when that happens, there will be a period where we'll have to pause a change. There will be a change freeze while that takes place. And until we have our partner in place and our plan, we don't know how long that change will be. So that makes it difficult for me to say what will happen exactly before that takes place, how long that pause will be, and what will wait until afterwards. So that's why we've got our list and we're working through it as quickly as we can. And what we've done is identified 2 external providers that have done this that we worked with before on this kind of work, that will be working with us over the next few months. And we've also recruited some expertise to work with us internally to get as many of those improvements and enhancements delivered in that window up until that change freeze. So, and then I suppose as we get clarity about that change freeze, we'll then start to think about what a programme of work looks like beyond that. But I think one of our reflections is to think about how we use a range of expertise from the market, so that there isn't over-reliance on one organisation to deliver what we're looking for.
So do you, I think, sorry, if I could just come back, I think you're telling us you don't really know the end point. So what should have been delivered, the whole thing should have been delivered by the 23rd of April last year. More than a third of it hasn't been delivered, and it strikes me there's no prospect of major progress of delivering the rest of it for what, another year, 18 months, 2 years?
So I really cannot say how long the change freeze will be. I just don't know. It could be weeks, or it could be a couple of months. I just don't know until we get that plan in place from a Microsoft's experts on what that transition will be and when. What we do have is a list that we will work through as quickly as we can before that change freeze occurs, and also we are lining up providers to deliver the other elements. So I would like to be able to tell you that we will be able to put in an online complaint solution and an account before that change freeze occurs. But actually, if the Microsoft partner comes in and says we want to move elements before you can do that, I won't be able to do that. So I'm unable to. It's not that I don't know what needs to be done. My issue is that I don't know when that pause in development will take place at the moment. And at the moment, we are assuming it will be sometime in the next 3 to 6 months. So we will work through as much of the list that we have in that period, and then the change freeze will occur.
But there will, sorry, this is my final point. But if we're then going to engage potentially, I think you said a couple of external partners who maybe we've worked with before, etc., etc. But I mean, all of that is going to take a long time to put together. We're not talking about a few months here, are we? We're not going to get what we expected to get in April last year for what, another 18 months or so?
I just can't give you a timescale. We have 2 providers already procured to deliver some elements of improvements, and we are market testing with a number of others. We are looking to benefit from the fact that the market has matured in the time since we went out, and so there are products on the market that we might be able to implement quite quickly. But I am unable to tell you when we will deliver the remaining 38% because of that change freeze.
David, in fact, it's been kind to you. It was 62% of transactions were automated, but only 50% of the job spec was actually done. And I'd like to drill down to that when we get into the closed session. But at this stage, I just want to look at what you say about there's going to be a review. I think you say on paragraph 5.1, a lessons learned review. A few questions about that. Is that about how the contract was awarded, or how we managed it, or both? Is what's one question. 2, who's conducting the review? Thirdly, who's it reporting to? And fourthly, how are we now, you just said, appointing new contractors if we've not learned the lessons from the failure of our appointment last time? Now, I can understand why you need to appoint people, but there's lessons to be learned, as you say yourself. Sorry.
So the lessons learned will look at the programme from end to end. They have, my colleagues in procurement have already done some review already of the procurement process for this contract, so that exists already. It will be done by our programme management office, so independently of anyone who was on the programme to deliver, to ensure that there are objective lessons learned, and it will be reporting into our improvement board, which is our transformation programme board within the organisation that monitors all of our portfolio of improvement projects. I think it's difficult to wait until all those lessons are done before we start improving. We kind of have to get the balance right. I can't wait any longer for people to be able to report fly tips anonymously. I know it is really difficult for residents, and we've got some really good feedback from members already about some of those things that we are also getting through the feedback from the website, where people are finding relatively small improvements really frustrating. So I think we're looking to try and be pragmatic there, not undertake major extensive or enter into major extensive contracts, but where we know there are providers who can deliver small pieces of work quickly for us, to look to use those as far as we can, so that we make some improvements in this window that we have of opportunity to do that. So I take your point, but we're just trying to get the balance right, I think.
Okay, are we? I think, are we at a point where we now need to move into closed session before we can carry this on? I bid farewell to Merton.TV. We look forward to seeing
goodbye, all three of you.
Tomorrow.